I bet $10,000 no one here can get her running. Brock Callahan slammed a leather duffel bag on the hood of the truck, cash spilling out the zipper. I can do it. He turned, saw Marin, 20 years old, 5'4", apron still tied around her waist from the diner. Who let this waitress near my rig? Grabbed her arm, pulled her close enough that she could smell the rye whiskey on his breath. You smell like bacon grease and dish soap, sweetheart. Go refill somebody's coffee. He flicked her forehead with 2 fingers. Hard. The crowd laughed. Marin wiped her face, looked at the truck, looked at the money. 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. Brock Callahan didn't know it yet. Nobody in that parking lot did. But this girl was about to make every mechanic in town look like a child playing with toy wrenches, and she was going to do it with a dead man's tools. The town of Calder Bay sits on the west coast of Vancouver Island, where the highway ends and the Pacific begins. Population 30,400 in summer. Half that in winter. 1 main road, 2 traffic lights, a government dock, and a pulp mill that hasn't hired anyone new since 2019. The kind of place where everybody knows your truck before they know your name. And in Calder Bay, there was no name bigger than Callahan. Brock Callahan, 52, white barrel-chested, red-bearded, ran Callahan Timber Limited. His grandfather started it in 1947 with 1 chainsaw and a mule. His father turned it into a fleet. Brock turned the fleet into an empire. 60 employees, government contracts across the island. A waterfront house with a dock and a float plane he barely knew how to fly. But the thing Brock loved more than the company, more than the house, more than the contracts, was a truck. A 1965 Kenworth W925, cherry red cab, chrome stacks. A Cummins NTC 335 diesel engine his father had rebuilt by hand in the winter of 1978. They called her Old Ruth, named after Brock's mother. That truck had hauled old-growth cedar down logging roads so steep you could see God on the way up and the devil on the way down. She'd crossed every mountain pass on the island. She'd survived washouts, rock slides, 2 fires, and a bear that once ripped the driver's mirror clean off near Tofino. Old Ruth wasn't a truck. She was a cathedral on 18 wheels. So when Old Ruth died on Highway 4 just past the Sprout Lake turnoff, engine coughing, sputtering, then silence, Brock didn't call a tow company. He called Ray Fenton. Ray Fenton, 50, ran Fenton's diesel and heavy equipment, the biggest shop between Nanaimo and Ucluelet, 32 years in the business. A red seal journeyman ticket framed above his desk. He showed up in a service truck with 2 apprentices and a diagnostic laptop that cost more than most people's annual salary. 45 minutes. That's how long Ray spent plugged into the engine harness, scrolling data, checking sensors, running injector pulse tests. He stood up, scratched the back of his neck, shook his head. Can't get a read on it. Might be the injection pump, maybe the whole fuel system. I'd need to pull the engine at my shop. 2 weeks minimum. Brock stared at him. The veins in his temples pulsed. You're telling me you drove 40 minutes to stand here and tell me nothing? I'm telling you it's not a parking lot job, Brock. Get off my property before I put you through that windshield. Ray packed his tools and left. Didn't argue. Didn't look back. The small crowd of loggers and townspeople watched him go. A few smirked. 32 years and a red seal ticket, and the man couldn't even figure out what was wrong. Next came Carl Lindgren, the vintage truck specialist, the guy every collector on the island called when they needed a classic Kenworth or Peterbilt brought back from the dead. Carl had diesel in his blood. He'd been restoring old rigs since before cell phones existed. He spent an hour, pulled the fuel lines, bled them, checked the lift pump, inspected the governor, reassembled everything with the slow precision of a watchmaker. Tried the ignition, once, twice, 3 times. 4, 5, nothing, not even a sputter. Fuel system's clean, Carl said. This old Cummins just quit. I've seen it before. These NTC engines, they hit a wall. Metal fatigue, internal wear. She's done, Brock. Brock grabbed Carl's collar and pulled him nose to nose. You're supposed to be the best on the island. I am the best on the island. And I'm telling you, she's finished. Brock shoved him backward. Carl stumbled into his own toolbox, tools scattered across the gravel. Get out. Every single one of you. Useless. Then came Nina Ashworth, former Cummins engineer turned independent consultant. The smart one. She arrived in a rental sedan with a laptop, an oscilloscope, a current clamp, and a confidence that filled the parking lot like perfume. She ran compression tests, cloped the injector waveforms, cross-referenced service data on her screen, took notes, typed formulas. She looked thorough. She looked expensive. 25 minutes later, she delivered her verdict like a surgeon delivering bad news. Complete engine overhaul. New pistons, new liners, new injection pump, new turbo rebuild. You're looking at $18,000 to $22,000. And that's if we can source NTC 335 parts, which aren't exactly sitting on shelves anymore. Brock's jaw locked so tight you could hear his teeth grinding. $22,000. To fix a truck that 3 experts can't even diagnose. Nina closed her laptop. I don't make the rules of thermodynamics, Mr. Callahan. No. You just waste my time and charge me for the privilege. Nina left. Calm, professional. Wrong. Brock stood alone next to Old Ruth in the parking lot of the Calder Bay Legion Hall. Saturday afternoon. The annual Loggers Reunion, where retired and active crews gathered for beer, stories, and bragging rights. 60, maybe 70 people milling around. The perfect audience for public humiliation. He reached into the cab, pulled out the leather duffel, and slammed it on the hood. $10,000 cash. Hundreds and fifties. The zipper half open so everyone could see. 10 grand. Right here. Right now. Anyone who can make Old Ruth run in 1 hour takes it all. No excuses. No, I need to take it to my shop. Right here on this gravel, let's go. Silence. 70 people. Not a single hand raised. $10,000 baking in the August sun and nobody willing to touch Old Ruth. That's when Marin walked past. She wasn't there for the reunion. She wasn't there for the trucks. She was cutting through the Legion parking lot on her way to her second shift. 4 hours waiting tables at the Breakwater Diner. Followed by 4 hours stocking shelves at the Petrocan on the highway. Her sneakers had holes in the toes. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band. She had $14 in her pocket and a paperback novel in her backpack. But she heard something. Not the crowd. Not the country music playing from someone's truck speakers. She heard the engine. Or rather, she heard what was hiding in the silence. A faint rhythmic ticking from Old Ruth's block. A sound so quiet that Ray's laptop missed it, that Carl's hands missed it, that Nina's oscilloscope never looked for it. Maren stopped walking, tilted her head, closed her eyes for 1 second. She walked toward the truck. Slow, hands in her apron pockets, like she had all the time in the world. Brock spotted her from 10 feet away. The hell do you want? Your truck. I think I know what's wrong. Brock looked at her sneakers, looked at her apron, looked at her arms, thin, calloused, grease-free. Then he laughed, loud, a laugh built for humiliation. You hear this, boys? The waitress from the Breakwater thinks she can fix my truck. The crowd rippled. A logger yelled, "Go pour some coffee, honey." Another one, "Wrong parking lot, sweetheart." A man named Ted Mackey, 6'2", 240 pounds, Brock's lead faller, walked up and yanked Marin's backpack off her shoulder, unzipped it, dumped everything on the gravel. Lip balm, a water bottle, the paperback, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and a folded piece of paper that Marin snatched off the ground before anyone could touch it. Ted picked up the paperback, read the title aloud in a mocking falsetto. Diesel Engine Fundamentals and Field Diagnostics. The crowd howled. That's where your big ideas come from. Ted dropped the book in a puddle of transmission fluid and stepped on it. Maybe stick to books that teach you how to make a decent cup of coffee, eh? Marin bent down, picked up the book, wiped it on her jeans, put it back in her bag. Brock watched all of this with his arms crossed, that predator smile, the one that made grown men look at their boots. You done playing mechanic, or do you need me to call your mother? Marin zipped her bag, stood straight. Same quiet eyes, I can fix it. Brock moved fast, got right in her face, so close she could feel the heat off his skin. Listen to me carefully, waitress. You see this truck? His voice dropped low. Dangerous. My father built that engine with his own hands. You see these men? He swept his arm across 30 loggers. They've forgotten more about diesels than you'll ever learn pouring coffee and stocking chip bags. And you stand here in your little apron and your dollar store sneakers and tell me you can fix my father's truck? He shoved her, both hands on her shoulders. Marin stumbled back 3 steps. Her backpack hit the gravel. You're nothing. You understand? You pour coffee. You bag groceries. That's what you are. That's all you'll ever be. A broke little nobody who wandered into the wrong parking lot. 70 people, phones out, a few live streams running. Not one person said stop. Marin picked up her bag. Again. Stood up. Again. 5 minutes. I can't fix it. I'll wash every truck here for free. Every single one. I can fix it. You pay the 10 grand and you apologize. Out loud. In front of everyone. Dead silence. Then chaos. Loggers slamming fists on tailgates. Someone threw a beer can that clanked off the gravel 2 feet from Marin's legs. She wants an apology from Brock Callahan. Someone get this girl a reality check. Brock tilted his head, that wolf grin. And when you fail, because you will, you don't walk away. You crawl, on your hands and knees, past every single person here. Past Old Ruth, past me. Deal? Deal. He spit on his palm, held it out. Marin shook it, didn't flinch. What nobody knew, what not a single person holding a phone could have guessed, was that Maren Holloway had been rebuilding diesel engines since she was 8 years old. And that faint rhythmic ticking she heard coming from Old Ruth's block? She'd heard it 100 times before, in her father's shop, on her father's workbench, with her father's voice in her ear saying, "Listen, always listen first." Isaac Holloway never owned anything that wasn't broken first. His shop sat at the end of Hemlock Road, back behind the elementary school. A corrugated steel building with a gravel floor that flooded every November and a wood stove in the corner that barely kept the pipes from freezing. No website, no sign out front, just a chain-link gate and a reputation that spread by word of mouth through every logging camp, fishing dock, and highway truck stop on the west coast of the island. People brought Isaac the things nobody else would touch. A 1971 Mac R series with a seized crankshaft that 2 dealerships declared scrap. Isaac had it running in 3 days. A Gilnetter's Caterpillar Marine engine that hadn't turned over in 4 years. Isaac rebuilt it on a rainy weekend while Marin sat on a milk crate watching every move his hands made. Marin was 8 the first time Isaac put a wrench in her hand. Don't just grab it. Feel the bolt. Let the metal talk to you. She didn't understand. Not then. She just liked the shop, the smell of diesel and iron, the sound of rain on the metal roof. The way Isaac would hold a part up to the fluorescent light and rotate it slowly, reading the wear patterns like sentences in a language only he spoke. By 9, Marin could name every component of an inline-6 diesel blindfolded. Isaac would pull a part from the scrap pile and hold it behind his back. Marin identified it by touch alone. Injector nozzle, rocker arm push rod, crosshead, every time. By 10, she started hearing things, not voices, not music, layers. She'd stand next to a running engine and hear what other people couldn't. The intake had a pitch, the exhaust had a rhythm, the injector timing had a tempo. And when something was off even slightly, Marin heard it the way a symphony conductor hears one flat violin in an 80-piece orchestra. Isaac tested her. Started a Cat C15 with a deliberately loose injector hold down. Marin found it in 6 seconds, started another with a hairline crack in the exhaust manifold. Marin pointed to the exact cylinder in under a minute. You've got the ear, kiddo. No trade school teaches that. No computer replicates it. Isaac had one phrase he said every single day. Before they opened the shop, before they locked up at night. Listen before you touch. The engine tells you everything. Marin heard it so many times it stopped being words. It became reflex, a thing wired into her nervous system like breathing. Then Isaac died. Marin was 15. A Thursday in January. Isaac was underneath a logging truck doing a brake job. The jack stand failed, 14,000 pounds of steel on a man who weighed 200. The ambulance came from Port Alberni, 40 minutes away. Isaac was gone in 6. Marin didn't cry at the funeral. She went to the shop the next morning, sat on the same milk crate, stared at her father's tools on the pegboard wall, each one in its exact spot, each handle worn smooth from years of use. She picked up his favorite wrench, a 3/4-inch snap-on with a nick on the box end, held it for a long time, then started working. For 5 years, Marin taught herself everything. Isaac didn't have time to finish teaching. YouTube tutorials on the library computer. Engineering textbooks from the thrift store in Port Alberni, $2 each, covers ripped, pages stained with coffee. She pulled engines from wrecked trucks at the salvage yard off the highway, rebuilt them on the shop floor, sold them to local outfits for $200, sometimes $300. The shop went under when Marin was 17. Back taxes. Her grandmother Bev couldn't keep up on a pension. The district seized the building. Marin stood on Hemlock Road and watched a stranger padlock her father's shop. She took the toolbox. That was all she could carry. Isaac's tools wrapped in an old flannel shirt, stuffed into a duffel bag that barely zipped closed. By 19, 2 jobs. Diner, gas station, 12-hour days. 6 days a week. Every paycheck went to Bev for rent and groceries. Nothing for herself except bus fare and library books. But every night, every single night, she'd sit on the back steps of their apartment on Inlet Street, close her eyes and listen. Trucks on the highway, generators behind the mill. The neighbor's F-150 idling rough in the carport next door. She could diagnose that F-150 from the back steps. Worn injector sleeve on cylinder 4. Slight compression leak. The neighbor spent $600 at Fenton's shop a week later. They replaced the sleeve. Marin was right. She was always right. She just never had the chance to prove it to anyone who mattered. Until today. Until Old Ruth. Until a parking lot full of people who looked at Maren Holloway and saw a waitress. They were about to see everything. The timer started at 2:47 p.m. A teenager in a Canucks jersey held up his phone and yelled, "5 minutes, go!" Marin didn't rush. She set her backpack on the gravel, unzipped the front pocket, and pulled out her father's toolbox. A dented steel case, olive green with eye. Hallie scratched into the lid in block letters. She opened it and laid the tools out on the ground in a neat row. 3/4-inch snap-on wrench, 1/2-inch socket set, flathead screwdriver, Phillips, a small flashlight with electrical tape wrapped around the body. That was it. No laptop, no oscilloscope, no diagnostic scanner. Brock looked at the tools and burst out laughing. "That's your setup? My daughter's art kit has more in it." His crew howled. Ted Mackey kicked a socket across the gravel. "Oops, hope that wasn't important, sweetheart." Marin picked it up, wiped it on her jeans, put it back in line. A logger named Gus Whitmore, 6'3", 280, hands like catcher's mitts, stepped forward and stood directly over her, blocking the sun. 4 minutes 30. "Better start practicing that crawl, waitress." Marin didn't look up. She knelt beside Old Ruth, placed both palms flat on the engine block, closed her eyes. The crowd went quiet. Not respect. Confusion. "She's praying," someone yelled. "The waitress is praying to the truck. Somebody get her away from there before she scratches the paint." A crushed beer can bounced off the ground near Marin's knee. She didn't flinch. Brock cupped his hands around his mouth. "Yo, coffee girl." Clock's running. "You here to fix a truck or take a nap?" Marin didn't hear any of them. Her palms pressed against the valve cover. Fingers spread across the cylinder head. She felt the metal the way Isaac taught her. Not with her hands. Through them. Then she leaned in, pressed her ear against the rocker cover, tapped the block 3 times with her knuckle. Light. Precise. Like a doctor checking a heartbeat. Brock's grin faded. Just slightly. He'd never seen anyone touch an engine like that. 40 seconds and she's cuddling my motor, Brock said. "Somebody get this girl a room." Marin opened her eyes, pulled the flashlight from the toolbox, aimed it at the injection pump timing window, then at the fuel return line junction, then at the ground strap bolt on the frame rail. 3 spots, 3 seconds each. She stood up. 3 problems. Not 1, 3. That's why nobody could fix it. They each found one thing, assumed that was everything, and gave up. Brock's nostrils flared. 3 problems in 40 seconds? Ray Fenton couldn't find one in 45 minutes, and you, a waitress who smells like hash browns, you found 3? Ray was reading a screen. "I listened. You listened." Brock turned Marin to face the crowd. She listened, everyone. Give it up for the pancake whisperer. Somebody get this genius a tip jar and a trophy. The parking lot erupted, people screaming with laughter. Gus mimicked Marin's pose, palms on an invisible engine, eyes closed, mouth open, and the crowd lost it. But one person didn't laugh. He was standing at the back of the crowd, tall, lean white hair combed straight back, wire-rimmed glasses, a plain green canvas jacket over a checked shirt. He looked like someone's retired uncle at a Saturday farmer's market. Arthur Pennell, 71 years old, retired chief engineer at PACCAR's Kenworth truck division in Chilliwack, British Columbia. 34 years designing, testing, and certifying every powertrain configuration that rolled off the Kenworth line. He held 6 patents on fuel system calibration for heavy-duty diesel engines. He'd written the factory diagnostic manual that every Kenworth dealer in North America kept in their service bays. He was in Calder Bay visiting his daughter for the long weekend, saw the crowd and the row of trucks from the highway and pulled over out of curiosity. Now he was watching Maren Holloway with an expression nobody in that parking lot would have recognized, because none of them had ever seen what Arthur Pennell looked like when he spotted genuine talent. He didn't say a word. He just moved closer. Marin knelt back down, wrench in hand, glanced at the timer on the kid's phone. 1 minute 14 gone, 3 minutes 46 left. I'm going to fix all 3. In order, injection pump timing first, then fuel return, then electrical ground. Brock marched over, grabbed the front of Marin's shirt and lifted her onto her toes. Fabric stretched, a button popped. You listen to me. You break 1 fitting, 1 wire, 1 scratch on that chrome and 5 minutes won't matter. Because I will personally make sure you never touch a wrench again. I will crush every tool in that pathetic little box. You understand me? I understand. He dropped her. Marin's knees hit the gravel. She didn't make a sound. Clock's ticking, sweetheart. That crawl position is calling your name. Gus cracked his knuckles. Ted and 2 other loggers moved closer. Arms crossed, shadows falling over the engine. Not helping, hovering, waiting for the moment they'd get to watch this girl crawl across the parking lot. The crowd pressed tighter, phones everywhere, 70 screens glowing in the afternoon heat. A live stream viewer count climbing, 300, 600, 1,000. Marin blocked it all out, every voice, every laugh, every camera flash. She picked up the 3/4-inch snap-on, her father's wrench, the one with the nick on the box end, and she positioned it on the first bolt of the injection pump timing cover. Her hands weren't shaking. Her breathing was even. Her eyes locked on that engine like nothing else on the planet existed. Arthur Pennell uncrossed his arms. He recognized something in the way she held that wrench, the angle of her wrist, the pressure of her fingers. The way she braced her forearm against the block for leverage, textbook form. No, better than textbook. Instinct. He pulled out his phone, not to record, to time her himself. 3 minutes, 30 seconds remained. Marin took 1 breath, then she began. The first bolt came off in 4 seconds. The timing cover lifted clean. Underneath, the injection pump coupling sat exposed. A spline shaft connecting the pump drive gear to the pump itself, synchronized to fire fuel into each cylinder at the precise instant the piston reached top dead center. On a healthy NTC 335, the timing mark on the pump coupling would align perfectly with the reference mark on the gear housing. 0 degrees. Dead on. This one was off. Marin aimed the flashlight at the timing marks. 3 degrees retarded. The pump coupling had slipped on the spline, likely from a worn keyway, advancing out of alignment so gradually that the engine still ran, until it didn't. On a modern common rail diesel, an ECU would catch the drift instantly, but on a 1965 Cummins with a mechanical injection pump, there was no ECU, no sensor, no warning light, just an engine that ran rougher and rougher until one day the fuel delivery was so far off timing that combustion couldn't sustain itself. Injection pump timing slipped 3 degrees retarded. Worn keyway on the coupling spline. She said it to herself. The way Isaac used to talk through a diagnosis out loud. She loosened the coupling clamp bolt, rotated the pump housing clockwise by hand. 3 degrees. Watched the timing marks slide into alignment. tightened the clamp bolt, checked it with her thumb. Firm, quarter turn more, 14 seconds. The whole repair took 14 seconds. Ray Fenton stood at the edge of the crowd, his face drained white. 45 minutes with a diagnostic laptop, missed completely. Because the laptop was reading electronic sensor data from the engine harness, and on a 1965 Cummins with zero electronics, the harness was retrofitted. It reported data from sensors that had nothing to do with the mechanical pump timing. Ray was reading the right numbers from the wrong system. Marin found it with her ear and confirmed it with a $2 flashlight. That's one. Brock glanced at Gus. Then back at Marin. Lucky guess. Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn, eh? He raised his voice for the phones. One lucky poke doesn't make you a mechanic. My dead grandmother could have bumped that pump back if she tripped over it. You want a medal? He slow clapped, loud, mocking. The crowd joined in. 70 pairs of hands beating a rhythm designed to humiliate. Gus grabbed Marin's shoulder and spun her around. You got lucky once, coffee girl. Touch that engine again, and I'll snap that little wrench in half. Marin turned back to the truck without a word. She traced the fuel return line from the injection pump back toward the tank. At the junction where the return line connected to the main fuel gallery, she found it. A hairline split in the return line fitting. Barely visible. A crack so small it wouldn't leak fuel, but it would leak pressure. On a mechanical Cummins, the fuel return system maintains back pressure to keep the injectors seated and fuel delivery consistent. A pressure leak in the return line wouldn't drain the tank. It wouldn't leave a puddle. It would simply allow enough pressure to bleed off that the injectors couldn't maintain proper spray pattern. Fuel atomization degraded. Combustion became erratic, and on a cold start, the system couldn't build enough pressure to fire at all. This was Carl Lindgren's blind spot. He'd bled the fuel lines, checked the lift pump, inspected the governor. But he tested the supply side only. Nobody tested the return side under pressure because on a truck that wouldn't start, conventional wisdom said the problem was fuel going in, not fuel coming back. Marin pulled a short length of copper tubing from the bottom of her toolbox. Cut to 4 inches. She always carried spare tubing because Isaac always carried spare tubing. Isaac Holloway kept 3 lengths of copper tube in his toolbox every day for 26 years. She disconnected the cracked fitting. Sleeved the copper tube over the split, clamped it with a hose clamp from her kit. Tight, firm, field repair. Not pretty, permanent enough. Cracked return line fitting at the gallery junction. Pressure bleed-off killed the injectors on cold start. Carl Lindgren pushed through the crowd, face twisted. Not anger, shame. The specific shame of a specialist watching his reputation collapse in public. I checked those fuel lines. I bled the whole system. You checked the supply side, the cracks on the return. Known failure point on NTC fuel galleries. Cummins issued a service bulletin in 1981. Bulletin number CT81-019. The crowd murmured. A bulletin number, from memory, from a girl who couldn't afford new shoes. Brock stepped in fast, jabbed his finger into Marin's sternum so hard she rocked backward. So you memorized a number. My kid memorizes Pokemon stats. Doesn't make her an engineer. 2 down, Marin said, like she hadn't felt a thing. Brock's face went dark red. He grabbed Marin's shirt with both fists and lifted her off her heels. 2 lucky finds don't make you special. They make you a freak who read 1 book and got lucky twice. He dropped her. Marin stumbled, caught herself. A logger kicked her toolbox across the gravel. Tools clattering. Tick-tock. Waitress. Crawl positions ready for you. Marin walked to the toolbox, picked it up, reorganized the tools without rushing, set it beside the truck. The laughter had thinned. People exchanging glances. A woman near the fence leaned to her husband and whispered, "How did she know that bulletin number?" A teenager lowered his phone for the first time. Not to stop recording, to actually watch. Arthur Pennell stood perfectly still. He had authorized Bulletin CT81019 from his office at the Chilliwack plant in the fall of 1981. Page 11 of the NTC 335 Supplemental Field Diagnostic Guide. He remembered the typewriter his secretary used. This 20-year-old had just quoted it from memory. His hand was trembling against his jacket pocket. 2 minutes and 18 seconds remained. Marin moved to the third problem, the invisible one, the one that would have stumped even Arthur if he hadn't been watching from the start. She dropped flat on her back and slid under the frame rail. Warm gravel pressing into her shoulder blades. The crowd pushed closer above, phones tilted down like searchlights. Live stream viewers passed 5,000. Comments had nearly stopped. Even the internet was holding its breath. Gus stepped back from the truck. Not respect. He didn't want to be on camera when this girl proved him wrong. Marin's flashlight found the ground strap junction. A single bolt connecting the engine's ground cable to the frame crossmember. On paper, the simplest electrical connection on the entire truck. A bolt, a braided cable, 2 metal surfaces. The bolt was tight, the cable intact. Everything looked perfect. Marin scraped her thumbnail across the contact surface beneath the bolt head. Green oxidation. Copper sulfate formed by months of coastal moisture and salt air creeping under the strap terminal. Just enough electrical resistance to weaken the signal from the glow plug relay and the starter solenoid. Not enough to show on a voltmeter reading from the battery posts, but more than enough to make the engine crank endlessly without the glow plugs heating, which meant no combustion on cold start, which meant an engine that turned and turned and turned and never caught. This was Nina Ashworth's blind spot. Her oscilloscope probes touched the wire, not the junction surface underneath the bolt head. The resistance lived at the contact point itself, a half-inch circle of corroded copper that no diagnostic software was designed to detect on a 61-year-old truck with no onboard computer. Marin pulled a folded strip of emery cloth from her back pocket, worn soft at the edges. She always carried one because Isaac always carried one. Isaac Holloway kept a strip of emery cloth in his left back pocket every day for 26 years. Short, firm strokes. Green to brown to bright copper gleaming against clean steel. She repositioned the ground strap flat against the crossmember, tightened the bolt by feel. Firm. Quarter turn more. Slid out from under the truck, stood up, brushed the gravel off her back. Bad ground. Corroded junction at the frame crossmember. Old Ruth's been losing glow plug signal for months, probably since last winter. Weaker every start until she finally quit. She picked up each tool and placed it back in the case. Wrench next to socket set. Screwdriver beside flashlight. Everything in its exact position. The way Isaac kept them. The way Isaac taught her. Closed the lid. That's 3. The parking lot was silent. Not the nervous silence after the first fix. Not the confused silence after the second. This was different. This was the silence of 70 people realizing all at once that they had been completely, absolutely wrong. 70 phones still recording. Not one person typing. The live stream chat frozen. 5,000 viewers across the country holding their breath. Brock Callahan stood 6 feet from his own truck, arms at his sides, mouth slightly open, eyes locked on Marin's hands. The same hands he had called useless. The same hands he said would never hold a wrench, now resting on a dented olive-green toolbox scratched with hollow eye. Arthur Pennell walked forward. The crowd parted without thinking. Loggers stepping aside for a 71-year-old man in a canvas jacket. He knelt beside Old Ruth, pressed 2 fingers against the injection pump coupling. Timing marks aligned. Correct. Check the return line repair. Sleeve tight, clamp seated. Correct. Slid his thumbnail across the ground junction. Bright copper, 0 corrosion, bolt torqued firm. Correct. Every diagnosis, every repair, every detail. He stood slowly, looked at Marin. Every single one. Perfect. I've trained engineers for 3 decades. Most of them couldn't do what you just did. None of them could do it this fast. Marin nodded, wiped her hands on her jeans, looked at Brock. Now try it. Brock stood in front of Old Ruth. He hadn't started that truck in 4 days, not since she died on Highway 4, not since the flatbed dragged her back to this parking lot like a body on a stretcher. He looked at Marin, then at the truck, then back at Marin. If this doesn't start, he said quietly, you know what happens. Marin said nothing. She stepped back, folded her arms, waited. Brock climbed into the cab. His hands found the wheel, muscle memory from 30 years of driving. His right hand found the key. He'd turned it 10,000 times. But this time he hesitated. A fraction of a second that 70 people noticed and 5,000 live stream viewers would replay in slow motion for weeks. He turned the key. The starter cranked once, a dry mechanical gasp. Then silence. Marin's expression didn't change. Brock turned the key again. This time Old Ruth caught. One cylinder fired, then the second, then the third, then all six, and the Cummins NTC 335 exploded to life with a sound that rattled the windows of the Legion Hall. A deep, thundering, unmistakable roar. The kind that vibrates in your chest before it reaches your ears. The kind that makes your jaw hum and your ribs ache. Old Ruth was alive. The exhaust stacks barked twice, then settled into a rhythm steady. Deep, perfectly timed. No sputter, no hesitation, no stumble. Just pure, unbroken mechanical heartbeat pounding through 61 years of Canadian steel. Brock's hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. He revved the throttle. Once, twice. The engine responded instantly, crisp, hungry, like something caged too long that finally broke free. The timer on the kid's phone read 4 minutes and 43 seconds. 4:43. 17 seconds to spare. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Old Ruth's engine drumming against the afternoon air, echoing off the Legion walls, rolling across the parking lot and down the highway like distant thunder. Then the dam broke. A woman near the fence let out a sound. Not a word. Just a raw, involuntary cry. The teenager who'd been recording dropped his phone. It hit the gravel screen first, and he didn't look down. An old man near the back took off his cap and pressed it against his chest. Someone started clapping. Real clapping. Not mocking. The kind that starts with one person and spreads like fire through dry brush. Within 5 seconds, 70 people were on their feet, clapping, shouting. Some of them with tears they couldn't explain. The live stream chat detonated. No way that just happened. 5 minutes. 5 actual minutes. This girl is a legend. I'm literally crying in a Tim Hortons drive-thru right now. Brock sat in Old Ruth with the engine rumbling beneath him. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his temples twitched. His eyes were wet. Not sadness. Not anger. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something he didn't have a word for. Because men like Brock Callahan didn't keep words for feelings like that. His father built that engine by hand in a garage, not so different from the one Marin grew up in. For 4 days, Brock thought that engine was dead. Thought the last living piece of his father had finally given out. And a 20-year-old girl, a girl he'd shoved, mocked, called nothing, brought it back in under 5 minutes with a dead man's tools. Brock killed the engine. The silence that followed was louder than the roar. He sat there for a long moment, then climbed down and stood face to face with Maren Holloway. The crowd held its breath. Brock looked at her eyes. Steady, quiet. The same eyes that hadn't flinched when she'd been shoved, insulted, humiliated in front of 70 strangers and 5,000 screens. He reached into the cab, pulled out the leather duffel. $10,000. Held it toward Marin. His hand was shaking. Marin didn't reach for it. Not yet. You owe me something else. Brock's jaw worked. The veins in his neck pulsed. Every logger in that lot watched their boss. The man who'd never backed down from anyone. Ever. Standing in front of a 20-year-old waitress and struggling with 2 syllables he'd never said to another human being in his life. The word came out like bone cracking. Sorry, he said it once. Low. Rough. Like it had been buried under 30 years of pride and concrete, and he'd had to break himself open to let it out. He didn't say it again. He didn't need to. Every phone caught it. 5,000 live stream viewers watched the owner of Callahan Timber apologize to a 20-year-old girl in a diner apron. Nobody laughed. Not this time. Marin took the money. $10,000. Didn't count it. Just zipped the duffel closed and set it on the ground beside her father's toolbox. The same ground where Isaac's tools had been scattered and kicked 20 minutes ago. Then Arthur Pennell stepped forward. The noise died. Something about the way he moved. Unhurried. Deliberate. Like gravity itself made room for him. Made 70 people stop talking at once. My name is Arthur Pennell. 34 years as chief powertrain engineer at Kenworth's Chilliwack division. He let that settle across the crowd. What this young woman just did. 3 separate faults. Diagnosed by ear, repaired by hand. Under 5 minutes, with tools older than she is. That is something I have never seen. Not once. Not from anyone in my entire career. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. Plain white. Black text. PACCAR Technical Apprenticeship Program. Full scholarship. Housing included. Salary from day one. He held it out to Marin. I am personally recommending you. Marin looked at the card, then at Arthur. Her hand was steady when she took it, steadier than Brock's had been. Thank you, sir. The kid in the Canucks jersey zoomed in on the card. The live stream caught it. Within 48 hours, that video would hit 3 million views. Within a week, Maren Holloway's name would appear in headlines she'd never imagined reading. But right now, none of that had happened yet. Right now, it was just a 20-year-old holding a white business card under a Vancouver Island sky turning gold at the edges with $10,000 at her feet and her father's tools beside her. The video hit 2 million views in 24 hours. By the second day, it was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook groups for vintage truck collectors, Reddit threads with thousands of comments. News aggregators running headlines. Headlines Marin would read on her phone at the diner counter during her break, shaking her head because none of it felt real. And with the video came consequences. Ray Fenton felt it first. The man with the biggest shop between Nanaimo and Ucluelet, 32 years, a red seal ticket on the wall. His phone started ringing the morning after the video dropped. Not with new customers, with cancellations. If a waitress with a flashlight can find what you missed in 45 minutes, why am I paying you $160 an hour? That was the polite version. Most weren't polite at all. Ray lost 14 clients in the first week. By the end of the month, revenue down 35%. He had to let his apprentice go. The red seal ticket on his wall hadn't changed, but the trust behind it had. Carl Lindgren had it worse. The internet found the live stream moment where Carl said, I checked those fuel lines. I bled the whole system. They put it side by side with Marin pulling out the cracked fitting in 3 seconds flat. The clip became a meme. I bled the whole system turned into a punchline across every diesel forum in the country. 2 logging outfits and a fishing fleet canceled their maintenance contracts within the week. A third sent an email that simply read, We've decided to go in a different direction. Nina Ashworth became the internet's favorite villain. Someone clipped her diagnosis. Full overhaul, 18 to 22,000. Cut directly to Marin fixing all 3 problems with hand tools in under 5 minutes. The side-by-side racked up 800,000 views on its own. Nina deleted her social media within 48 hours. Her consulting website went dark. A former client posted a 1-star review that said only, ask her about the Kenworth. And Brock. Brock Callahan didn't lose his company, didn't lose his contracts, didn't get publicly shamed the way the 3 mechanics did, but something shifted. The other logging outfits heard the story. His crews heard it. His own men saw it. Saw their boss grab a 20-year-old girl by the shirt, shove her, call her nothing, and then stand there frozen while she proved him wrong in front of the entire internet. 3 weeks later, when a foreman from a crew in Campbell River called asking if anyone knew a good diesel mechanic for a vintage Kenworth, Brock gave them a name. No explanation, no context, no story. Call Maren Holloway. She's the best I've ever seen. It was the closest Brock Callahan would ever come to saying sorry a second time. Marin used the money to clear her grandmother's back taxes. Enough to remove the padlock from the shop on Hemlock Road. She walked in on a Tuesday morning. The air smelled like dust and diesel, and underneath, faintly, something waiting. She hung her father's tools on the pegboard, each one in its place. The 3/4-inch snap-on with the nick on the box end, center hook where Isaac kept it. She opened the shop door. Sunlight hit the concrete floor for the first time in 2 years. That evening, Marin sat on her father's milk crate, pressed her ear against her first customer's engine, closed her eyes and smiled. The same smile Isaac Holloway wore every morning for 26 years. Quiet. Certain. A woman who listens before she touches because the engine tells you everything. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're too young, too small, too broke, too different to matter, remember this parking lot. Remember Maren Holloway's 5 minutes. Remember that every single person there laughed, and every single one was wrong. Drop a comment. What's your 5-minute moment? That one chance you never got, or the one you're still waiting for? Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and hit subscribe. Because every week I've got a story that'll remind you why you should never ever underestimate the quiet ones. They're not quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they're listening. And that's exactly why they win.